Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Freese. I'm the mayor of Tonganoxie. I'm calling to order this April 18th regular meeting of the Tonganoxie City Council. Ms. Huntington, will you note that I am present and call the roll for City Council, please?
Will do. Rocky Hempel.
Here.
Jacob Dale.
Here.
Laura Lee Stevens.
Here.
Chris Donnelly.
Here.
Jennifer McCutcheon.
Here.
Would you all care to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Item 2 on the agenda is the approval of minutes. This would be from the March 21st meeting since we skipped the last meeting. Are there any questions or concern or conversation regarding the minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item 3, the consent agenda is a review of our bill payments. Are there any questions, any conversation, or concerns about our bill payments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is old business, and I'm seeing nothing here on my copy. Is that correct? Did we have anyone sign up to speak for today? All right. The new business is a really cool thing that we get to do once in a while, but not very often. Item A, Tonganoxie High School Wrestling State Tournament Achievement Recognition. Coach, would you like to tell us about your team?
You guys can come. You can just sit back there. Yeah, this team, they rose to the occasion. We knew we had a good team this year. We knew we had a chance, and I asked all these boys here to make sure that they did their best, and that's exactly what they did. And by their best was good enough to be 4A state champions. It's pretty cool.
It is very cool. So, you know, coach speak, they say their team is strong, they're tough, they're mentally tough. What characteristic do your guys have?
These guys were united. They wrestled for each other. Not only themselves, but they made sure they scrapped and fought and clawed for every point to make sure that their teammates got what they wanted as well as themselves.
That's great. And this is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was,
Okay. This is the first team championship for Tonganoxie in 30 years?
31 years.
31 years.
The second, 1991 was the first boys team state championship. That was a cross-country team. And then this year we won boys wrestling team.
That's fantastic. Well, we would like to give you a plaque and take a picture with you, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
All right, very cool. You join us, Council.
Me with my cute hair.
Yeah, step on up. Certainly.
Holy smokes, there's a lot
We're gonna have to 2-layer, I think, guys. There we go. Do your best wrestling pose. That's right. All right. That's Jake, just a little. There you go. All right. Thanks, everybody. 1, 2, 3, smile. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. The community is very proud of you. Thank you very much. Council, do you mind if I call an audible here and move the item 1 under J, the mayor agenda, the proclamation for Leavenworth Casa up on the agenda, to do that now? Is that okay with y'all?
That's fine. Sure.
Okay. We've been asked to consider a proclamation from the Leavenworth County Casa Association for proclaiming April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the city of Tonganoxie. Mr. Mr. Porter, do you have more information on that?
Mayor, I do.
Sorry.
Deborah Lyles is here with CASA, so I'd invite her up to introduce herself and maybe give us a quick synopsis of what CASA does and why this month and the proclamation is important to the community as a whole.
Well, good evening. Excuse me. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, and we advocate for abused and neglected children in Leavenworth and Atchison counties. I just want you to know we're working so hard for these children to get CASAs trained and on cases for these children, and we are in dire, dire need of volunteers, so spread the word. If you know anyone, send them our way. Thank you.
Where can people go to get information?
So you can go to our website. You can go to casalvks.org. You can call the office at 913-651-6440, or you can follow us on Facebook.
Okay, thank you very much. You are doing God's work.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you
we
so
are.
very much.
I appreciate that. We really, really are working hard.
Yeah. Do we have is the proclamation in the packet, or do you just have, okay. Well, council, I'd like to proclaim April, the rest of April as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the city of Tonganoxie. Do you all concur?
You betcha. Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
There,
Thank you
bet.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your service.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll go jump back up to new business. Item B, Resolution 04-2201. Mr. Brakovich?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. So this resolution is to consider an agreement with Western Consultants for grant administration services associated with our EDA grant for the water tower. Western Consultants also conducts business as governmental assistance services, and in the past, we've used their firm and worked with Brett Wagner specifically, most recently on the CDBG grant that we got through the state, KDHE, for the low water crossing repair. So initially, as we applied for the grant and went through the application and initial approval process through EDA, we had anticipated that between Mr. Porter and myself, we would handle the administrative side of the grant. After we had our launch meeting and kind of the pre-meeting for that and saw the level of monthly reporting, quarterly reporting, semi-annual and annual reporting, combined with things like certifying payrolls for both our general contractor and all the subs, it became pretty clear we needed to find a third party to help us do the grant administration side of things. We had originally carved out about $45,000 of our grant to handle that. EDA has indicated if we're not going to handle the administration in-house, we can push that amount over to our construction side. In comparison, we received a proposal from Western Consultants in an amount just under $25,000 to perform that same work. We did not go out for bid, but within our own procurement policy, there's a carve-out that any time that the city of Tonganoxie is acting as the general contractor on a project, which we are, in this case, we manage that process, we don't necessarily need to go out for bids. The other thing is we're not using grant funds to pay for it. It'll be paid for from city funds. So we don't have any sort of procurement issue. Brett did participate in a couple of meetings already, and I let him know that if for some reason the contract or agreement didn't get approved tonight, we would be able to pay him on an hourly basis, but that's been submitted as well. I think in their package just showing what their hourly rates are. So from staff perspective, I think it's a aggressively priced agreement. We know the performance from GAS or Western Consultants and Brett, and we feel comfortable asking for your approval on this item tonight. Be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Brakovich or staff?
I don't, this looks like a good idea, actually, to use our services, considering what.
Yeah, and
the
they're
scope
very,
of what's going on, yeah.
they're very familiar with it, and they'll act as the point of coordination between what's happening on the construction side, BG monitoring a lot of that, and our, like I mentioned, our city reporting requirements. So I think they'll be a great partner for us on it.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Any other questions or conversation? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we approve resolution number 04-22-01, approving and authorizing the execution of a contract for administrative services for the city of Tonganoxie, Kansas, Economic Development Administration grant between the city of Tonganoxie and Western Consultants LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second?
I'll second that,
Thank-
but I'd like to possibly add not to exceed $24,950.
I'll
If
agree to
that's
that.
okay,
Yes.
Mr. Donald.
Okay, all right. We have a motion and a second and a friendly amendment to that motion. Accepted. Ms. Huntington, would you mind calling the roll for the vote?
Rocky Hempel.
Yes.
Jacob Dale.
Yes.
Laura Lee Stevens.
Yes.
Chris Donnelly.
Yes.
Jennifer McCutcheon.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Huntington. Moving on to item C, Resolution 04-2202. Mr. Brakovich.
Thanks, Mayor. So this is a resolution to consider an agreement with Leavenworth County, the cities of Lansing, Basehor, Leavenworth, and ourselves for the Regional Transportation Capital Improvement Plan Study. Mr. Cause is here tonight with the Port Authority. You'll probably recall, I'll do kind of a quick timeline. Back May of 21, Mr. Cause came here. He went through the presentation material of why having a regional transportation study is important for the county. And to summarize it as briefly as I can, there's a lot of grant and funding opportunities that come up through either KDOT or other federal associations that require, for all intents and purposes, a regional transportation study to be in place. And that was something that the county was lacking, and they found, whether it was the county or individual cities that were pursuing these grants, that was kind of a miss. Those were points in an evaluation matrix that the grant applications weren't getting. So this is an attempt to correct that. There is quite an extensive list of existing plans and study related to transportation for the county. Really two things that come into mind for the city of Tonganoxie is the 2440 Corridor Management Plan. That's not just between KDOT and Tonganoxie, that includes Basehor and a few other entities. And then, looking at things like 4 lanes of 2440 all the way to Lawrence. But primarily that corridor management plan kind of tells us how many access points we can put in on 2440. And I understand there's a reason behind it. But sometimes it's difficult for us to get projects through because of that. But the other parts of the county, the other cities are subject to other things. We have a 2440 corridor plan. There's also a Highway 7 corridor plan, and then a bunch of other ones in between. So this project will kind of take all of those, meet with a bunch of stakeholder groups that include city representation at some level, to go through and kind of prioritize either projects or plans, and prioritize them in the sense of, if there's a specific grant to go after, which project lines up with those components of that grant, and then follow a prioritization list. And Greg, I'm sure if I fouled any of that up, you'll offer great clarification. But to go back to the timeline while Greg's coming up, so he was here in May. The county went out with the first RFP in, I gotta check my cheat sheet here, August of 21. And although it went out to all of the 18 pre-qualified consultants for KDOT, they only received one proposal. And so after some discussion, it was decided that this is a big project, not only in terms of scope, but cost. It would be better to go back out for bid, which they did, and I think by December of '21, there were 5 bidders that responded. And through some discussion, decided to go with Kimley Horn. And then the agreement between how each entity that I identified earlier in the kind of title of this, who's responsible for what in funding of that project. So the last thing I'll say before Greg will give us better details is, one of the things we were asking for is an amount not to exceed. The agreement per se doesn't say that. It says, it's approximately 15,000 is the ask of the city of Tonganoxie. However, there is a provision in there that states what the total cost is of the study, and it says that the total cost would not adjust without all of the funding partners being in agreement with the adjustment. So even though it might not be the typical language that when we draft an agreement that you're probably accustomed to seeing, not to exceed amounts, that kind of stuff, the language is there, and in effect it says the same thing. There wouldn't be a cost increase without the city council having a chance to weigh in on it. Okay, so with that, Mr. Cause.
This is something that I went out and made presentations to all of the cities back in May. I got unanimous support from all of the city council elected representatives, which to me was amazing, but that we could all agree on one thing. But this is really, I'm hoping that this looks at the future in the 10 to 20 year, 30-year timeframe. We had several conversations with the Secretary of Transportation, with Mark, and basically what she said is, we want to do stuff in Leavenworth, but you guys need to come together and say, okay, this is what we want, these are our priorities. And she says, I don't want to get in the middle of your family squabble. And so the purpose of this is to try to pull everybody together and try to get everybody to agree on something. It's going to be a challenge, but I think we can do it. I'm optimistic. So Tonganoxie's part of this $550,000 study is $15,000. As Mr. Brakovich mentioned, the wording in there isn't probably exactly the way I would like it, but it cannot exceed $550,000 without all the agencies approving it. But let's say that for some reason Lansing wanted to do something, we want to study something that's kind of related to this, but it's going to add to the cost. It could be possible that that would be added to the study, but then Lansing or Lansing-Leavenworth County or Lansing-Leavenworth County KDOT would pick that cost up and wouldn't be borne equally among the percentages that are mentioned in the agreement. But for starting off, it is going to be limited to a $550,000 study, and Tonganoxie's commitment is for $15,000. With that, if you have any questions, the scope of work was included, I think, in your packet, fairly extensive. There's a lot of meetings, virtual and in person, along with the meetings include city staff on a monthly basis, then the city councils, elected officials. I think there's 2 or 4 meetings of them, and then there's some meetings for the public too. So we're trying to get information from everybody, use all the studies, come up with some current cost ideas, and then Kimley Horn has a computer model where they can model this stuff and put weighting on it to try to weight what's the most important. And you can kind of play with that weighting, is safety more important, is economic development more important, is time, to Kansas City most important, what's most important. The one thing that I'm trying to stress, I'm going to stress to the county too, is that I want the study to have a chance to get its results without political influence, without the influence of certain elected officials. I know some of our elected officials have very strong thoughts of projects they think that need to happen in Leavenworth County, but I'd like the study to look at all the data, and let's have an engineering background a logical study of how we arrive at everything. And so that's kind of the purpose of this. And, you know, if this thing comes up and just for an example, it says, okay, we need to be looking at a new interstate between Tonganoxie and Baser. You know, that's something that obviously isn't going to happen in the next 5 years or 10 years. But at least we have a plan that, hey, this is what we're thinking. In 30 years, you know, none of us may not see it, but at least we're planning in that direction. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to get out of this study and to get KDOT a list of what our priorities are, what's most important to us. So with that, I try to answer any questions anybody has. I do want to make a comment too, that the Port Authority, I'm representing the Port Authority, have been chairman. Tonganoxie has a representative for the Port Authority, Mr. Chris Donnelly, and Mr. Chris Donnelly was drafted as the chairman at the last meeting. So I want to thank him for his commitment and time. He's done a lot for economic development in Leavenworth County. So you guys got a real champion on your council, so thank him.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Cos. Every time I hear you speak, I am more and more impressed with you as an individual and your leadership and your desire to make the county a better place. And I cannot thank you enough for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Council, do you have any questions or?
I'd just make a comment on this. The study, and some of you were around back when 2440 was a really skinny road and the traffic was bad, and a study which took place years and years and years before was part of the reason we got that improved. And it is such a good asset for the community and for the county. And this, I sure foresee this to be the exact same thing, only bigger. It's going to encompass everything. And as Greg said, getting the public involved and getting public feedback is really important, and not being swayed for one thing or another just by one or two individuals. So I think it's Greg's done a great job on it. It has been a long slog trying to get through it. But, you know, Tonganoxie, we need to study this stuff. More than likely not us, but our kids, you know, my kids that live here and y'all's too, and I think it's an important thing. So Greg, thanks first of all for your leadership, as the mayor said, and secondly for putting this all together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Any more questions, council? I have one question for, excuse me, sorry. I have one question for council, or for Ms. Kirstelich. Section 1 of the contract says, sorry, glasses, the governing body hereby approves the contract in substantially the form attached hereto. What's substantially mean in a legal sense?
We do that in every resolution, just in case there's some changes that are caught after approval, usually non-substantive changes. So that's what that, substantially the form. So it's all of the material terms and provisions are going to be the same, but it would allow for some minor modifications that wouldn't have to come back to council.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all we need from you, Mr. Cos. Thank you very much. Council, do you have any conversation or motion or any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Hempel, go
I'd
ahead.
like to make a motion that the Tonganoxie City Council approve resolution number 04-22-02. This is a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of the contract for the Regional Transportation Capital Improvement Plan Study among the Board of County Commissioners of the County of Leavenworth, Kansas, and the cities of Lansing, Baser, Leavenworth, and Tonganoxie, Kansas.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Was that Ms. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon. So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Huntington, would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mayor, I'll do this one. I took Lindsay's microphone here.
Oh,
so
okay.
Just for a moment. Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Hempel,
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes.
Mr. Dale.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Thank you again, Mr. Cos. Appreciate your work.
We need to be involved when it comes up,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and we will be. Thank you, Greg. To get our people involved.
I agree.
Okay, moving on to yeah. Item D, consider approval of fire station carpet replacement expenditure. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll kick the item off, and then our Fire Chief, John Zimmelman, is also here this evening, and so I'm sure he'd be excited to talk with you about any specific questions you may have. The agenda statement that was included in the packet tonight outlines in a lot more detail what's being considered, but in short, there are some carpeted areas at the fire station facility that hopefully each of you had a chance to tour, or if not, we'd love to arrange that. But there are carpeted areas such as the living room space and the bedroom spaces that the carpet is showing wear and is in the condition in which it needs to be repaired. Chief Zimmelman collected quotes from available vendors, and as you see listed, the lowest responsive quote was Midwest Carpet Center Enterprises LLC, located just over on 4th Street. Their bid total was $3,220. The next bid up was a couple $100 more, and the last bid didn't reply quoting the correct materials, and so it wasn't deemed an option to consider because it wasn't the spec outline of what was needed. Cost for this item is easily able to be accommodated in both the fire equipment fund and the fire's general fund line items, and so we'll ask that you approve the procurement, and we'll make that purchase and get the work started quickly. But happy to take any questions you might have.
Chief, do you have anything to add?
The only thing is, what we're looking at is something, what they were able to afford when they built the fire station is kind of a builder grade carpet. What we're looking at is something that's more built for concrete surface, kind of lets it breathe a little bit, maybe not have any mold problems down in the future, things like that. And this is more of an industrial carpet. In order to save costs, we're gonna do all our own furniture removing, we're gonna remove all the carpet, we're gonna do all that ourselves and prep the floors. All they gotta do is come in and put it in that way. So, this carpet should last us hopefully 10, 12 years. I mean, these are high traffic areas. We're only doing the living areas where people stay and sleep.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions, council?
When was that fire station built, Chief?
I think it was 8 years ago.
8
When they
years
did when they did the addition onto the back, it was 8 years.
Okay, thank you.
Seemed like it was longer than that. Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. Do we have any conversation, council, or do we have a motion at this point?
I'd make a motion that we authorize expenditure associated with the fire station carpet replacement project utilizing the services of Midwest Carpet for the amount not to exceed $3,220.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Do you still have Ms. Huntington's mic?
Still do, for one more item.
Will you call the roll, please?
Thank you. Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Hempel,
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes.
Mr. Dale.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate the work that you do at the station and anything we could do to keep our facilities top-notch. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Item E, consider request for the city's support for business loan program application by Isabel Troncoso. I apologize if I mispronounced that name. Mr. Porter, I believe this is your item.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce Isabel. She's here tonight, and I'll ask her to step up to the podium real quickly here. This item is being presented as a result of staff discussions with Ms. Troncoso about the city's potential ways to support her efforts, which I think are intended, I'll let her describe her intent, but I took it as intended to help grow and enhance the culture for local small businesses and probably businesses of all size in the Tonganoxie community. She included a proposal, and we included some details about a business loan program through Grow Leavenworth County that has been identified as an option that she's interested in. And we'd like to ask that she kind of explain her ideas and her request of the city and be open to any questions and feedback you all might have, and then go from there. So turn it over to her if you don't have any questions for me.
Normally, we have speakers, have a time limit for speakers. Council, do you have an idea for a time limit? 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
I think with the packet we have, 5 minutes.
Everybody agree to that?
Yeah.
Okay. Once she
Thank you.
starts speaking, we can start the clock.
Go ahead, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before I go into what my project I'm proposing. So I have my master's in education, specifically curriculum development. I'm also I have my project management certificate, and I'm bilingual. I just recently moved to Tonganoxie, and I'm highly networked. I have lived in about 8 different states before I moved here, but I chose to live in Tonganoxie because I love small towns, specifically small town America. And I've spent the last 2 years researching, visiting other towns in Kansas, and have seen some, I guess, some areas of growth, but also a lot of areas of potential. So I'm an entrepreneur, and Grow Leavenworth, the grant from Grow Leavenworth is specifically for entrepreneurs to apply for. And it's and they go from like, I think like 12 grand to like 40 grand. And so on my proposal, I came up with a couple of ideas that would merge different organizations that we have in town through like large-scale marketing events. I've done some research, and I've seen that Governor Kelly is proposing, she's going to be putting out funds for revitalizing historic, small-town, historic downtown areas. And so I saw this grant as a way to be proactive in that. The ideas that I've had, I have talked to the Tonganoxie Arts Council, I've talked to the Historical Society, and I have talked to a couple of other businesses in town. But what I am proposing is to create something that is truly unique and for the town of Tonganoxie. Like I said, a little bit about my background. My career has mostly been in grant writing, specifically for school districts. The last grant I got was around $150,000 that I applied for myself. I've also have a large emphasis on grassroots community development. So I have gone to basically small towns with a small budget and have increased those to create, I guess, like ways to bring the community together. So currently, the reason why I wanted to come in front of City Hall is because if I apply for this grant, it would be through my business, which I'm a consultant right now for different, basically small business startups. But I would like to apply for this grant to use towards these events, but am also, because this cannot be my main source of income, I am looking to see if there's anyone in the community that would be interested in either investing or donating into these ideas that I have. And yeah, I'll be available all week. I can definitely meet at Grounded Coffee to talk about it. But I have been meeting with the head of the organizations kind of on my own time. And I can give you an idea of, if you'd like to hear an idea that I have. So I'm a, this is a little out of context, I am a stand-up comedian on top of everything I do. And at a venue that I was at a couple of months ago, I met a man who owns the semi and the vehicle that is in Smokey the Bandit. I don't know if you've seen that movie. I love it. But I was thinking, because this man wants to do business with me, I would love to create an event here where we showed the movie. I know we already do like a grass on the parks kind of thing. I recently found out that the high school does an auto show every year for like a fundraiser to send the students to do like a skills workshop. So I would like to pair all of these events together, maybe at a specific time that Tonganoxie is already doing like a big event. So, you know, we have like the storytelling event coming up, but because the storytelling event is at Kane Family Farm, which is a great, great venue, these funds that I would get would also bring people downtown, maybe like leading up to the event. And I know since I've been going to the Tonganoxie Business Association meeting, they just put in their own money to be in like the Kansas magazine. But these funds that I would get from this grant, like I would like to be the one to do that extra work. So that's it.
It's your time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind staying. We'll have to figure out how to turn off the bomb first. Okay. I would feel more comfortable, I write letters of recommendation, that sort of thing for grants all the time. I would feel much more comfortable if we had some recommendations from the groups that they want you to do this job.
Sure.
Before I think I could sign off on it.
The grant application isn't due until June 1st.
Great.
So I knew I'd have time.
So I think and council, you can disagree with me, and please do if you care to. I would like to see a letter from each of our organizations that they support, that you would do some work for them and maybe detail that work. And then come back to work with Mr. Porter and try to whip that into shape for another meeting at another time. But if we can get the details that we need, I think that we would enjoy trying to find a way to help you. Council, do you have anything else on this topic?
Well, and I think, as I understand it, it's try to find ways to help you help us as well, right? That's it too, right?
Well, I appreciate anybody who wants to help the city grow and prosper and give things back to the community for our citizens to have more than they have. I think I would have to understand more of how all that connects, being in economic development for the better part of 40 years. And I sure see it needs leadership and somebody to get out and make it happen. And it sure seems like you may have that potential, but I'd sure have to make sure I understand how it all interconnects.
Yeah, I think so too. Anything else? Any more feedback?
I think the only thing I'm concerned about we've already funded those organizations this year, so I think the organizations, if we're gonna go that route, have to come back and explain how they're gonna incorporate it into their funding for next year.
So you're saying it would be in the 2023 budget?
Yes.
If we were to do that, okay. Which we're starting on now. Okay, so that's my request to you. Get the blessings from the organization and get with Mr. Porter and come back at another meeting. Thank you very much. Appreciate your initiative. Okay, item F, city manager agenda. I think actually this is Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the financial report is included as a printed copy on the dais for the council's attention, and it's also posted on the city website with the agenda packet materials. It's a little lengthier than usual, and I'll explain just a few key items and attachments that we don't have each month. I'll do a quick overview of page 1, though, to kick us off. Through March 31st, 2022, we're a quarter of the way, 25% through fiscal year 2022. We're currently standing at 35% of total budgeted revenue collections, and we've spent a little over 20% of overall budgeted expenditures in all of the individual funds that each have unique budget authority. We completed our latest processes associated with the 2022 B and C debt issuances that were completed actually back in February, but some of the transactions and the closings took place in early March. So when you look at the debt proceeds fund in particular, you see things like a little less than 2.8 million for the water tower project that's now added to the city's funds available based on those temp notes being issued. We've completed our spring debt service payment obligations, and our next debt service payments will be due in July, with just a couple of the odds and ends that happen in the summer. Most of those take place in March and in September of each year. The ARPA funds, we still haven't received our second of the 2-year commitment of funds, so we're currently sitting at a little less than $340,000 in available funds, and we expect to receive another $426,000 later this year. Those total funds available remaining are at just over $765,000. There's a key deadline coming up in a little more than 2 weeks at the end of this month for annual reporting for non-entitlement units. So our next monthly financial report, it's our goal to include the city's submission of our data to that report, and that's a critical requirement, and it's a first time doing the report, so we're glad we're going to have that knocked out, and appreciate the support of resources like the League of Kansas Municipalities and GFOA in providing some guidance to us to navigate those requirements. But we don't have a whole lot to report because we still maintain a healthy balance of funds left to spend yet. Finally, our final page of our financial report today includes what's called the quarterly financial report. This is a requirement that it be included in the local newspaper and signed by our city treasurer, and so that report is something we'll cover at the very end of the overall budget report. What we also have listed at the bottom of page 1 are a couple potential items that could look like they need a budget amendment later this fiscal year. As we've gone through the year, we've started to identify some changes from estimates made last summer, and so some of these items may require a public notice, a public hearing, and a new amended adopted budget for this year, mid-year. The Special Highway Fund includes some discussion items that we'll talk about next month in the May 2nd City Council meeting. Some of those include a carryover of work planned for last year, but actually going to be completed and expended in 2022. So there's a budget adjustment for that circumstance. And then potentially some scope of work and overall funding adjustments that we'll talk about more as well on May 2nd. The city's water operations and water capital funds may have to have adjustments to reflect the outcome of the bids we received and approved at the last March 21st meeting from Caldwell Tanks and our other various support services. And so we may true up our numbers just to make it cleaner in those two funds for the adopted budgets necessary to spend some water capital and water operational costs. Finally, the Capital Projects Fund, we still also look to complete the Church Street Bridge project bid letting, and that budget may also need to be trued up to that outcome depending on what the bids come in at. So that's something we'll stay tuned for as well in the future. Finally, the budget amendments completed to date are on January 18th, we completed the Police Equipment Reserve budget adjustment for Motorola grant proceed receipts and expenditures. Chief Lawson actually gave me an update last week too. We've received the radios, but we're still waiting on a couple particular components of them that will allow them to get into service. So we're eagerly awaiting those to be delivered and added, and then we'll have those online and operational. So moving forward with that project. Any questions about the overview before we move forward? Okay. So page 2 of the report illustrates revenues and expenditures year-to-date for what we call our major funds. General fund for general city services such as fire, police, general public works, and administration efforts. The water and sewer operational funds for those utilities. The special highway fund for road improvement projects and maintenance. And the debt bond and interest fund for debt payments. The gray bar to the right of each sub-component for the funds is the budget for this year. The green item in the revenues, the dark green is this year's revenue, the light green is last year's revenue year-to-date through March. We don't see any concerning trends on the revenue side. Our general fund revenue is outpacing last year, and that's largely due to sales tax at this point, and we'll talk more about that. On the expenditure side, we still have a lot of expenditure authority in all of these funds, as you see illustrated at the bottom of that page. So really good progress year-to-date on both those fronts. Page 3, which is the next page of the report, we added a similar summary for what we're calling utility and non-utility capital funds. These are funds that have a specific purpose, generally to improve capital, sometimes equipment and vehicles and facilities, but capital projects or capital items. So the funds included in this report of revenue and expense are the capital projects fund, which is largely funded by the county sales tax that the city receives a share of. The fire equipment reserve, which is one of the funding sources we talked about for the earlier approved item for carpeting at the fire station. The police equipment reserve, which was used for the radios purchase. The sewer capital reserve for sewer capital projects, and the water capital reserve for water capital projects. As you can see, the revenue is on pace to meet budget, and even in the water capital reserve case, exceeds budget already this year. Go ahead, Mr. Hempel. Yes.
Are we concerned the fact that these equipment funds and reserves, that we're really not gaining anything over the years? The fact that we're spending what we've got in the reserve, and that's it, where we're not building up a surplus by any means for a bigger emergency?
Sure, that's a good question. We don't have established policy targets for many of these reserves of the capital projects type funds. Anecdotally, what we strive to do are obviously protect and build those reserves for purchases we know are likely to come due soon. Like in the case of vehicles for the police equipment fund, which has contributed either to the vehicle purchase or the equipping of a vehicle, and we know the lifespan of those. But a good example, Mr. Hempel, is the capital projects fund. We built that up intentionally for a period of years to make the balloon payment on the County Road 1 debt obligation. Then we built it up over the last 2 years to pay for the Church Street Bridge project this year, which we hope to get done. So really, the goal setting and the strategic level discussion about future reserve efforts or protection of reserves for the future is a key topic at budget development time. So
Okay.
that's a great point.
It's just an
that we need to talk
observation,
about
when
it.
I look at the chart, we're not gaining.
Certainly, yeah. We want to keep maintaining and protecting reserves, but we need to also identify the ways to use the funds. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, thank you. I'll point out just two kind of irregularities on the revenue and the expense side real quickly for context. The sewer capital reserve shows the effects of a $1.2 million budget adjustment in 2021 in revenue, and that was for the county's funds contributed towards the 12-inch loop water line and the sewer interceptor project. So that was a one-time adjustment actually last year that reflected that giant increase in revenue compared to a normal year. On the expense side, the capital projects fund, you can see, has a large amount of capacity remaining, and that little over $650,000 is anticipated to be used later this year for the bridge project, Church Street Bridge. So those are just a couple things I wanted to point out. Moving on to page 4, the major revenues detail. Last month, we looked closely at the sales and use tax. Page 4 is the city general fund and city infrastructure sales tax fund. We did see continued strong performance, and I won't go into great detail, but I will point out on the general fund side, city sales tax was about 5%, outpacing budget, so we're well ahead of where we predicted revenues would be year to date through 3 months. And on the use tax side, we're about 15% ahead of budget. So those amounts and real numbers are not tremendous, but they are impactful. And so that's really good, and it reflects again that trend we've seen now since actually 2020 at the earliest with increased sales tax. I do want to point out one typo in the percent change from 2021 on infrastructure sales tax in the chart. Those numbers were mistakenly copied. The real numbers are the exact same as the chart above for the general fund at 13.4% and 68% change from last year. I'll just make note of that since it was caught after these were printed. Moving to page 5, the county sales tax, it's also on track ahead of budget, about 5% ahead of budget on the sales tax and 19% year-to-date on the use tax side. So that, again, is building strong fund balance in the capital projects fund for us at the point. The same typo was actually caught there on the percent change from 2021. It's 9% and 45% for those two. I apologize for that error. Any questions on sales tax before we move on? Okay, thank you. Moving to page 6 of 7, one item that I wanted to point out, because it's planned for next meeting, we did budget $368,500 this year from the infrastructure sales tax and other special highway funds to support our 5th consecutive year of street maintenance activities. Mr. Heskett is busy at work preparing those materials for the 2022 program of improvements, and we'll have that for your discussion and consideration on May 2nd to look at. So that's the funding that's planned and ready and set aside at this point for that level of work. A couple things else to point out, highlighted in the general fund column is the $15,000 that was just approved a few minutes ago for the regional transportation study. We still have a few other items outstanding, but 3 months of the year gone, we're checking off a lot of boxes on this annual checklist of initiatives to complete. I won't go through the whole list, but if you have any questions, please let me know. And moving to the next page, page 7 of 7, our budget timeline. March spring retreat was already completed. Our May CMIP work session, we have tentatively slotted in for May 18th, our second meeting in May at 5 p.m. So we'll probably send out a calendar reminder to make sure that work session is agreeable to your schedules. And it'll be a good kickoff next meeting to talk about street maintenance for this year, and then the very next meeting talk about capital initiatives for the upcoming year budget and further out in the out years. Our next work sessions after that will be in June and July. We'll hold some base budget and department budget presentations in a similar fashion to previous years. Our budget key topics are listed below. There's been no changes lately, but if you see or think of things that you'd like to be added to that list that's highlighted, please let us know at any time, and we'll be glad to add that and refer back to this as we look through budget planning later this summer and have those discussions. Any questions? Yes.
In the impact on inflationary trends, does that include cost of borrowing?
Yes, we should include that. When we're talking about commodities, that's a lot of times what our departments focus on the most, Public Works, but it's equally true of borrowing, yes. So we can add that
Well,
as a.
It's considering in the last 3 months, interest rates have increased by 115 basis points and probably going to continue at a significantly faster pace. We probably should put it in there.
Okay, yes, we'll make note of that. Thank you. All right. Finally, I'll point out the very last 2 pages of the report are 2 fund balance reports. You may ask why the numbers don't exactly match up. The first fund balance report is for all 29 budgeted and non-budgeted funds, including funds that are considered pass-throughs, like our insurance proceeds fund, our rural housing incentive district funds, where the city just collects money and gives it over to another entity or person, depending on the situation. So that's included holistically to show all 29 funds, and that's the city's overall financial condition and ending balance as of the end of March. The last page, though, is that quarterly treasurer's report that I mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation. It only shows 20 funds because you're able to carve out specific ones that are called agency funds, where the city's not the intended final recipient of dollars. But it does break them out into enterprise funds, special revenue, debt service, capital projects, and then it also lists the outstanding debt as of the end of March. So it shows the effects of our payments made to date, as well as our 2022 A, B, and C GO bond and temp note issuances earlier this year. So that's a good summary of our fiscal condition, but of course there's other points you can discuss, such as the materials on the preceding page. But happy to take any questions you may have, and overall, really good financial conditions, and we're hoping the year continues on this track.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Council, do you have any questions or comments or conversation about that?
I got a couple comments, they're easy ones. Have we closed out the schoolyard townhomes project? Are we completely closed out with it?
I'm not sure, sorry, excuse me.
As far as loans, everything, you know, everything we did for that project, are we done with everything the city has to do?
No, so that project it's a rural housing incentive district. So it's actually just now starting to generate that tax increment that can go back into that project.
Okay. And I just want to commend you on your charts and graphs. It really makes it a lot easier to sit down and digest this a lot better.
Great,
Really appreciate the staff and your efforts in order to get that done.
thank you.
Any other conversation? All right, thank you, Mr. Porter. Excellent work. Moving on to the city attorney agenda, item G.
Mayor, I don't have any items.
Thank you so much. Mayor Pro Tem agenda, Mr. Hempel, do you have anything?
Yes, I only have one thing. There's going to be a May 11th Planning and Zoning. The League of Municipalities putting it on down in Derby, Kansas. I enrolled, and I believe a couple from Planning and Zoning for the city of Tonganoxie enrolled. We'll be down there May 11th.
Very good. Thank you,
That's
Mr. Hempel. City council agenda. Anyone?
I do want to remind folks that this upcoming Saturday is the Pet Health Day, where community members can take their pets, their dogs, correct? Just dogs? Dogs or cats, and get their vaccinations and register their pets with the city of Tonganoxie. And that'll be at the fire station from noon to 2? Oh, 2 to 4. Okay, I just want to make sure I get it correct. So at the fire station from 2 to 4 p.m. And it's a reasonable rate, and you can also get your pets chipped at that time. It's put on by the Business Association, the Fire Department, the Leavenworth Humane Society. No. Okay, Tonganoxie Business Association, the fire station. Anyway, I participated last year, and it was great. It's a community service, so if you have dogs and cats, and it's also a great way to make sure your pets get registered with the city.
Do we have a cleanup this weekend also? Did I see a flyer for that, or was that the previous week?
That was the previous weekend. I
Okay.
think that
I
was the
apologize.
9th. Yeah.
City council, anyone else have anything to add? Okay, mayor agenda, we moved CASA up, and at this point, we'd like to go into executive session. Does someone have the
I'll
paper?
do that.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly.
Yeah, I would like to move that the city council recess into executive session to obtain legal advice related to correspondence received from Unilock, Unilock Chicago, Inc., pertaining to the real estate contract of sale between the city and Unilock pursuant to the attorney-client consultation exception KSA 754319B2. Executive session will include city attorney, city manager, assistant city manager, and the open meeting will resume in 15 minutes back here in the chambers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Donnelly. So we would be back at about 8:14 roughly? Yep. Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.